Hello and welcome to the Supernatural Track here at Continual. I'm your host, Gail Z, and tonight we are talking about facing ghosts, what the ghosts told us about the characters. But before we dive into that, let's let our wonderful panelists introduce themselves, starting with Travis.
Hi, my name is Travis Adams. I'm a social worker with the Department of Veterans Affairs. I specialize in helping veterans and active duty service members through with mental health disorders through pop culture. And I'm glad to be here. Thanks.
Okay, Susan.
Well, I'm Susan Nylander. I teach English at Barstow College, and I am also a fan and academic. I can't say it the way my writing partner does, fan and academic together. I am a supernatural fanatic, and I have, along with my writing partner, I've written a collection of essays about death and supernatural. And next year we will have another collection about how women are represented and presented and treated and mistreated in supernatural. There's a whole lot going on there. So lots of fun.
Okay, and I'm Gail Z. Martin and Morgan Bryce. As Gail, I write epic and urban fantasy, but all of my modern day worlds are ones Sam and Dean could walk right into and feel right at home. So ghosts run throughout the show. From the very first episode, we start with the pilot and the woman in white and it's ghosts. But if you step back, sometimes, most of the time, maybe all the time, we learn something about the characters, Sam and Dean and other characters who are interacting with the ghosts because of the ghosts. So let's start with that pilot episode, and then we can jump around to any episode with ghosts that you think has an insight. Travis, what about what did we learn from the woman in white about Sam and Dean?
Because that's the episode that really brings Sam back into the life. And you have this reoccurring ghost that comes, and you have this reoccurring theme in the show, and then you have these brothers who are reunited. And it's not until the woman in white reunites with her kids and faces that she kind of her how do they phrase it, her needs that need to be done, like she faced it, right? She faced her fear of going to see her kids, and that's what kind of got her unfinished business finished. And then you start to see like Sam and Dean's unfinished business, even thinking about their mom and hunting the demon with the yellow eyes.
Okay.
And like how it all kind of goes through with a theme throughout the show.
Okay, Susan?
Yeah, I think once we understand what is going on with the woman in white, and we understand that Constance has this history and the pain that she is dealing with following, what she's done and reckoning with what she's done. And that's something that is she's got so much fear about. And when Sam pushes her and makes her face that fear, I think that that's an interesting thing that happens. And I think that's the beginning of, we see a lot of Sam and Dean having to face their fears, not wanting to, being in denial a lot of the time. And then really a lot of times the spirits or the ghosts do make them face their own fears. And that idea of their mother, like Travis was saying, facing, that scene on the bridge between Sam and Dean when Sam says, if it weren't for pictures, I wouldn't even know what mom looked like. And Dean's reaction to that is so strong that, he's kept her in this safe place. And for Sam to sort of say something that brings that back to Dean, I think that that's part of why that big reaction. He had kept his mom in this safe place, and then Sam is a little dismissive of that. And so I think that's the beginning of them facing their pain, their past, their reconciliation, all of those things that they have to reckon with.
There's also something really interesting that happens in that episode where Constance is choking Sam. She has gone after, the whole conceit of this was that her husband cheated on her and she found out, and she was so distraught and heartbroken that she drowned her children and then killed herself in retaliation. And so she goes after men who are cheating, and she starts choking Sam, and he says, I wasn't unfaithful. And she says, you will be.
Right.
Now, that's a really interesting clue to drop early on, first episode of the show, because as far as he ever said, he never cheated on Jessica, but he did leave his family. He did leave Dean. So he did cheat, so to speak, on family bonds. He doesn't, as we get further in, he doesn't tell the complete truth to Dean about having his visions and some other things as it goes along. I guess you could argue that, you know, even with Ruby, he's being unfaithful to his brotherly bond with Dean because he's trusting her more than Dean, although that happens much later. So what do you make of that little tidbit that they just drop out there about Sam being unfaithful sometime in the future? Travis?
You know, I never thought about like the long-term theme of that piece of it. But even if we think about like in season 11 with Just My Imagination, and it has a flashback to him being a kid and him slowly wanting to leave and run away from the life even at that young age. That's a huge theme that's been in Sam's life, because, you know, even in the after school special, he talks to the teacher about he doesn't want to be a mechanic like his dad. He doesn't want to do that. He wants to do something different. And he has that teacher that tells him he can. And then he even thanks that teacher later when they go back and do the ghost hunt in that episode, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit later. But I think that, you know, you get this theme of Sam's life of he doesn't want to be in the life, but he keeps getting drawn into the life.
As we also find out later, that teacher was possessed by a demon to try to get him out of the life.
Yeah.
So poor Sam. Susan?
Yeah, I think that idea that Sam has always been a little unfaithful to his family in the family business, that he's always been sort of seeking a way out. Much later episodes, I think it was season 15, where they have the flashback and Sam has college or not applications, but catalogs, and you know, he's already at that young age, yes, looking to find a way out. So in that way, he is trying to escape, and he's not towing that family business line. So I think in some ways you can say he's unfaithful in that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that certainly Dean sees it as unfaithful. Even if we go back and we look at when they're in heaven, and, you know, one of Sam's happier moments is when he leaves to go to Stanford, and that just sort of shatters Dean in a way. You know, I think he sees that as betrayal, certainly, in a lot of ways. But yeah, I think he cheats with Ruby. He cheats with, so you know, Constance wasn't wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah,
I still make that Zachariah messed with what they saw in heaven to drive a wedge. That's my headcanon I'm sticking to.
Truly, yes.
Yeah.
But he doesn't deny it either.
Right.
No.
And each of those memories, because there's a series of them, right? Like even somebody else's
Mm-hmm.
Thanksgiving,
Mm-hmm.
a happy memory.
Yeah.
And Sam admits that, yeah, these were better times.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when he runs away and he has a dog,
Mm-hmm.
you know, those were his fun times, you know, when he lived on, what did he say, Funyuns and and I forget what the soda was, but yeah, he was away from dad. But then again, Dean's like, well, he wasn't the only one.
Yeah. So let's look at some other ghosts. You know, I'm flipping down through, I looked up ghosts in Supernatural, and we're never going to get through all these in
Yeah,
panel.
I have
So
a couple in mind, but yeah, exactly. There's just way too many.
I mean, even in the first season, there are like 9 episodes that are ghost related, and that's just one season. So let's
Right.
just hit, the ones that stuck in our minds as being particularly portentous. Travis?
Some of the ones that are really coming to mind were like I mentioned the after school special, where Sam, the bully that he was at the school, and Sam kind of put him in his place.
Finally,
What's that?
finally.
Yeah. Yeah, and then but like getting to hear his dad's side of the story when he's interviewing, trying to figure out, and his dad's the bus driver, and getting to see like, hey, that kid was going through a lot. He just lost his mom to cancer. He was being picked on at school. He was being bullied, right? And his dad only knew half of it. But just being able to remind ourselves, and Sam really gets to see like, hey, everybody's going through something. We just don't always know what the whole story is. And I think that's a true story in our lives, in day-to-day lives. Like we're all going through something. Some of us just a little bit different at different times. Some of us have it really good sometimes, and some of us, don't.
Mm-hmm.
And we never really know the true picture. And I feel that that's what adds a lot of depression to today's current era, because everything's so social media bound, where everybody highlights the glory years, right? With some Bruce Springsteen in there, the glory years, and we're neglecting a lot of the heartache that some people feel, because they don't want to see that, or it doesn't get posted.
Somebody said once that social media shows you everybody's sizzle reel, but not their blooper reel.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. Travis reminded me of something that I was working on, certainly in when Mandy and I were looking at death. And one of the things that I thought about when I was losing my own parents, in the 19th century, we had what was called the Eris Moriendi, which is like the rules for dying. And we had these set up, and there were certain prescriptions ways that people followed when they took care of the dead, and the final, time in the life. People wore black armbands in public, so you knew there was mourning going on. They would put a black wreath on the door. You knew the house was in mourning. Women were in veils and black, and we had this outward expression of grief. And people knew, oh, I better be careful with this person because they're grieving, they're going through this. And these were prescribed rules that people followed. Well, we don't have that these days. I would be going through this grief, and yet standing at the tire place, and the people around me had no idea that I was going through grief. Or if I go to the grocery store, if we don't know who's going through grief, we don't have those outward expressions. And so I think that that's something that we're kind of lacking in. And it's easy for us because we've professionalized death to the point that we don't have that intimacy with it. We don't, we don't do hunters' funerals in our yards. We don't do a lot of that work ourselves. And so we send that off to the professionals. So we have separated ourselves, and it's real easy for us to deny that death is around us, but we don't know who's going through what they're going through. So
just for a minute there, I had this moment of telling my homeowners association, what are you doing? Oh, we're burning a body. I mean, go real well.
Well, like in Asa Fox, when she says, they're having the wake tonight and then they're going to burn the corpse tomorrow. She's like, can't believe I just said that, like it's normal. And so, the idea of that. But I think that those outward expressions of grief, we don't really see that at all. And we don't know. So that idea of be kind always is truth.
Okay. Do you have a ghost for us this time around, Susan?
Actually, I do. I didn't mean to be tangent girl.
No, that's okay.
But you know who I was thinking, and this is maybe not what you guys were thinking, but I have a couple in particular were Joe and Ellen. When they're at the psychic fair, and the guy says, he hears from Ellen that Dean needs to, kind of get himself in shape and tell somebody how bad it is. And then Joe, whose spirit is brought back by the Egyptian god, or the judge, and that
Osiris.
whole scene between them, yes, when she's, turning on the gas on the stove and getting ready to flick the lighter. She didn't want to do it, but she, is being compelled to do that. So I thought that was interesting, because these are actually people that they know, that they dealt with, that they're carrying all this guilt over, because Joe and Ellen sacrificed themselves so that the brothers Winchester could fight another day. And so I don't know how different it is when it's a ghost, it's hard with Bobby. They really had to make themselves finally wait for Bobby to say, yeah, it's time for you guys to burn that thing and get rid of me. So I think it's different when it's someone versus just some rando ghost that they need to take care of.
Yeah. I'm going to go back to another first season one, and that is Asylum, because this is where they go into the haunted asylum. The mad doctor was experimenting on some of the patients, and in particular, his experiments, we find out, induced rage and very unbalanced emotions. And it's our first time we see ghost possession. And Sam gets possessed and nearly kills Dean. And we have him spewing this real awful stuff at Dean. And later they have to pick up the pieces. And it's one of those where, they always tell you to be careful what you say in anger. Sometimes people say things when they're angry that they mean a little bit of, but not as much as, or as fiercely as it comes out. And that interaction between them really colors quite a bit of the season after that for Sam to, it takes Dean a long time to trust Sam again after that. And what Sam has said about, Dean being daddy's little soldier, daddy's blunt instrument. Why don't you think for yourself? Why couldn't you, I left, why didn't you? Cuts really close to the bone. And, nobody can hurt you like the people you grew up with. So even though Sam swears later that he didn't mean it, that the rage was not completely him, there's enough of a seed of truth in that it drives a wedge for a long time. And it even really gets echoed much later in Sex and Violence, when the siren tries to drive a wedge between them. You get the same kind of, you're weak, you're not, I'm stronger, I'm a better hunter, all of which plays to Dean's vulnerabilities. So back to you, Travis.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point, looking at those two and kind of playing off of like the first Ghost with Constance, and like the themes, and having Sam being cheated, like cheating on the family. And it made me think about a quote from Robert Downey Jr. that said, expectations are like should statements, and should statements are resentments under construction. And these two brothers have extreme resentments for Dean for Sam for leaving, Sam constantly. And I think it's even in that episode that Susan was talking about, Defend Your Life, with the Egyptian god. I think it's at the end of that episode during their BM scene,
Yes.
where
Yes.
they're talking about, Sam's like, hey, you got to let this stuff out. The reason I didn't get judged is because I don't feel guilty. And that's what I really loved when I looked at what we're talking about today, and I reminded myself of this episode, that what the ghost gave was guilt, and the guilt that these people carried, right? Whether it was the guy that got chased by his car, or by the people he shot, and by Dean, it's by Joe. And the guilt that we're reminded of by these ghosts coming back into our lives and coming back into our memories and interfering with our quality of life. So it's like everything just really starts to play together as you start expanding on it with these themes, with the way that they interact with each other. The brothers really do have these resentments that come out whether anger, whether it when soulless Sam, you know, and Dean being told that Sam's a better hunter, at least when he has no soul, things like that.
And Dean's a better hunter when he has the mark of Cain. So, you know,
Right.
they get a turn.
Right. What I find really interesting, and yes, going back to season one, I am looking at the list of all the different episodes that season, and you're right, there's so many. But what's interesting is that each of these ghosts presents in a very different way. You know, there's Hookman, there's the Provenance, where the little girl in the picture, you know, that was probably one of the scariest episodes, I think, with you know, and the family is creepy enough looking anyway. But then when the little girl, it's the little girl, and they're so shifted thinking it's the guy, it's the dad, and then you find out that it's this little, you know, more creepy children. Thank you, Supernatural. So that one I think was really a scary one. And then the Hell House, which they thought was a ghost, and it turns out to be a tulpa, right? When, you know, but it presented like a ghost. So one of the things that is pretty interesting about this show is that, yes, it could be the same monster, but it always seems to present itself in a different way, which I think is what helps Sam and Dean stay on their toes. They don't get too complacent about, you know, burning bones does become kind of a routine, but they don't get too complacent because they find out they're wrong often. That what they were thinking was one thing turns out to be another.
Well, and interestingly enough, one of the things that the whole issue in Providence reveals is that Sam going away to Stanford and experiencing a completely different type of life, especially a high income life, gives him skills as a hunter he didn't have before, because he walks into that art gallery and he can talk about Grandma Moses, and he can talk about different styles of art, and he understands the concept of provenance. And meanwhile, Dean's kind of rating the hors d'oeuvres. But if Sam didn't have that knowledge, which he certainly didn't get from John, he learned at Stanford, right, they never would have had the in with her to be able to solve the hauntings. So we also start to see that this very despised thing that Sam did turns out to actually pay some dividends for hunting.
Art history is not a useless.
That's right.
Take that class. It'll help you in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, even in the episode we were talking about with the Defend Your Life, Sam uses his pre-law knowledge to help defend Dean against the Egyptian god.
Right.
Which he uses many times throughout the series.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to hit two that kind of bookend each other, Home in the first season and All Hell Breaks Loose Part 2 in the second, because this is where we see Mary Winchester and John Winchester come back as ghosts. Yeah. And they really almost kind of function as a Patronus for the boys, because in Home, there's this burning figure that shows up, and we at first think it's the threat, but it turns out this is in the home that Sam and Dean had been, you know, where the fire happened that killed Mary. Turns out it's actually Mary's ghost protecting the family from something worse. And so she protects Sam and Dean, she protects the child in the house, and they are able to send her on. And then in All Hell Breaks Loose 2, after the gates of hell have opened and they're having that battle with Yellow Eyes, John Winchester breaks out of hell, of course he does, and shows up to incapacitate Azazel long enough for Dean to fire the Colt and kill him. And then we see John, you know, taken up to heaven. But in that case, the parents that they spent so much of the show grieving show up in a very protective way as spirits. So not just memories, but their essence is protective. And I thought that was a very interesting and unusually optimistic and positive note for Supernatural.
Especially given their failings as parents, prior
Both of
to their death. So that might be a way of redeeming, I mean, the show is about nothing but redemption so
Right.
often. So I think that might have something to do with that as well.
Back to you, Travis. Give us another one.
Yeah, I was thinking about yellow fever and the ghost sickness. Because one, that's just a great episode that I think majority of fans love, especially, Dean's scream, it being like a huge gif that's sent around still. But just like somebody that's taken advantage of, even in Mannequin 3, same thing, where the ghost comes back to harm the people that harm them. And then sometimes Sam and Dean are like, well, these guys kind of deserve it, but it's still their job. So they're kind of torn in that aspect. Like, do we do what's right or do we do what works? And what works is, hey, these people are not good people. Do they deserve to be alive? But at the same time, when they attack dicks, because Dean gets attacked in Ghost Fever because he's kind of a dick, and Sam doesn't because he's not that much of a dick. So I think that's really like interesting to me, that the more dickish you can be, the more you get messed with.
Okay. Susan?
That was an interesting thought. The ghost sickness, and yes, it was played for comedic purposes, but really it was pretty scary when it was coming down to the end. And that's where we get the really scary little girl Lilith. She makes her return, and I don't think she was ever as scary as when she was in that iteration. She was certainly the scariest, but for him to see those things, and then the sheriff, he's going after Dean, but you do have to sort of feel for, that's the thing about the boys too, they have compassion. So when they find out the story, they may still have to put the ghost down, but they do have that mixed feeling. They do have a mixed feeling about it. And sorry, somebody wants some attention. Right? Yeah. So I think that was an interesting setup. And yes, talk about an ethical dilemma about having the twins in or the sister in Mannequin 3, as you were saying, that she's got the kidney. How can we rip the kidney out and burn the kidney and free, kill? It turned out they didn't have to, but what an ethical dilemma that was. They really were kind of, until the dead sister actually is the one that causes her sister's death by taking over baby. I think they really had an ethical dilemma going on.
Yeah. And when you start thinking about the history of the ghosts, like, they get more vengeful, then they get more powerful, and that's when they can possess cars, different people, mannequins. But then you have these experiences like with Bobby, like with Kevin, that they have to try to be able to possess or move things or interact with the living because they're still not vengeful. And to be good, it takes a lot of work to be helpful still, but it's possible. But to be bad, it doesn't take a whole lot to be powerful, right? And that's even going back to the anger piece between the brothers. Like, it's easy to snap when you're angry. It's hard when you're calm.
Well, yeah, that was when Bobby was getting his lesson in the house with all the ghosts, and the guy that was, kind of owning all of these spirits and keeping everyone in there. But yeah, Bobby having to practice that was awfully powerful. I'm going to let you guys talk, and I'm going to mute while the siren goes by.
Oh, well, one of them that it's an easy episode to gloss over when you're first watching the series, which is Houses of the Holy, because it's sort of a monster of the week. They think maybe an angel is smiting people, and this is before Castiel's entrance. This is before we've really gotten any bigger cosmology than just yellow eyes. Dean doesn't even think there are angels and that this whole thing is above their pay grade. They're just here to deal with monsters. And of course, it turns out that it isn't really an angel. It's the spirit of a deluded dead priest who is carrying out his own vengeance in the name of God. And so they deal with him like any other ghost. What's fascinating is that the insight we get into the brothers is we find out that Sam prays every night. Dean, on the other hand, is pretty much agnostic. What do you mean? You know, there's no God, there's no heaven, there's no hell. You know, they're still really early. Give them credit. They don't know much yet.
Right.
Dean is very dismissive of this whole thing until he realizes how serious it is to Sam. And then for all his agnostic fervor, when Sam's really crushed by finding out this wasn't an angel, Dean's really compassionate and kind of helps him go, look, if it helps you to believe, if it helps you to pray, I'm not going to bust your chops for it. You do what you need to do and it's okay. And I think the side on this is I heard Jared and Jensen at a convention say that, you know, early seasons, I think this is just season 2, they were new into the series and they were uncomfortable with this because they asked to sit down with like Kripke or with Singer and say, the real Bobby Singer, not Jim Beaver, and say, you know, is this show going to have an edge? Is it going to have a message? Is it driving something? Because we're not really very comfortable with this. You know, is this going to be busting on religion and stuff? Fast forward to season 15. Well, let's just kill God. You know, so I'm not sure where the personal shift came with the actors as well as we know where it came with the characters, but somewhere in there they went from, I'm not really comfortable to, yeah, let's kill God. I want that.
Yeah. I find it really interesting that that God is the big bad, you know, ultimately. And well, and as a writer, it's really fascinating that, you know, Chuck is a writer. I loved the idea of God being a writer personally. Yeah. Loved that. And I think that oh, by the way, yeah, that's that ending scene in Houses of the Holy. I saw that perfectly in my mind when you were talking about that and how Dean is very, very kind with Sam, and Sam's really just downhearted about it. But I think what he says was he thought he saw, you know, sort of God's justice or vengeance or something in the guy that he was chasing. But so Dean has a question at that point too. And I think that he doesn't want to believe, but he doesn't necessarily not want to believe. But I find it interesting that yes, they changed tact, you know, toward the end.
Isn't that the episode where at the end the guy gets kind of a final destination death that they killed the ghost that was after him, but then like a pipe slides out of a bunch and goes
right through the windshield. Yes.
And Dean's like, okay, maybe there was some divine justice here because that's just way too weird.
Yeah.
You know, when I work with clients with mental health, one of the questions sometimes we ask is about religion and looking into that. And usually people go, like, if they were very religious before trauma, they tend to either go away from it because, like, why me? If I'm a good person, you know, that just world belief. But another one is that, like, I only reach out when I'm really struggling. I only pray when I'm having a real difficult time. And you see that Dean, he's like, I don't know if you're real, but here's a shot. You know, when he first starts to pray, and it's only when he's at his wit's end, and then slowly, even calling for Castiel when he knows angels are real, he still waits, and then it becomes like anytime, and they make a joke of this, anytime you stub your toe, you reach out to him. So it becomes almost like a crutch for Dean at a point. But I think when you start having more positive experiences, you start to kind of go towards it. Thinking about where the story goes, they start to have more positive experiences for the boys, even Jared and Jensen, not Sam and Dean, but they start to see this kind of happening in their acting lives. So I wonder if that's when they got a little more okay with it because they saw the benefit of it.
Well, they also had years to learn to trust, Kripke and the writers, and that's the difference in age between what 22 and 37. You do get some perspective shifts in there.
For sure.
To 26 and 40, you do see things a little differently. Travis, back to you for another round.
Yeah, I was thinking about, and it's not really, it's kind of going back to what we're talking about with that Egyptian god episode of with the guilt about people. And then it made me think about when they did go to heaven the first time and they're bouncing around and then they get saved by Ash. And Ash is like, hey, we're cool. I love this place. Like, I'm stoked. And that's why he didn't get brought up. But, when he first died, they felt really guilty about that. They carried that with them. So to get like kind of that reprieve, I thought was really cool that they did that. And then for it to play off later in season 7 with that episode of like, they didn't get that with Joe. Right. They kind of got it even with Ellen a little bit when the Titanic doesn't sink, right? And they got these 50,000 more new souls for Castiel and his army. But then they tell Bobby, and Bobby tells Ellen, who he's married to in this alternate timeline, that hey, if we sink the Titanic, Ellen's gonna die. And she's like, if that's what it takes, then okay. And she was accepting of her fate. So I thought that like not necessarily ghosts, but thinking about how that plays off for them in the realms of guilt and why they're impacted by the ghosts that they do see. That was really cool.
Speaking of guilt, Folsom Prison Blues, they owe this guy something because he saved their dad's life. And so they really put their lives on the line to go into this prison to go after this ghost. They think it's this Moody guy. And again, that's one of those things where they think it's one thing and then it totally shifts and they find it's this, crazy nurse. So that particular one, but yeah, they went in there. Dean's crazy ideas out of all the million crazy ideas that he has. And Sam thinks this is by far the worst of them. But, they're really kind of playing fast and loose with their freedom and their ability to even do the job by getting themselves put in jail. And then Hendrickson is right on their tail. So I think it really, they're kind of playing fast and loose with their own freedom by going in there, but it's because they feel like they owe this guy something for having saved their dad's life in Vietnam. So, couldn't there have been another way? Couldn't they have gone in as guards? Couldn't they have gone in any other capacity? But no, they have to go in as the most vulnerable part of the population. So that's an interesting thing too. And it almost feels like, in our Death and Supernatural book, one of our contributors, Mikhail, he wrote about Freud's death drive and how Dean, has this drive toward death. And it almost feels like in that particular episode, he was talking mostly about Mystery Spot, but you can see Dean's death drive, going toward that. And this particular episode, I think, they're going after some ghost. They're going in as the worst possible part of the population, the most vulnerable. And Dean doesn't seem to mind that.
But at least we won't trade Sam for smokes. I mean, that's one good.
Yeah, he got that promise. But and then we got the whole James Garner line and Steve McQueen, which I loved. So there's so many of these great callbacks that the brothers do, which are way before they were ever born. But I do love that they have those kinds of moments, those pop culture moments that they understand. because a lot
Well,
of the generation doesn't, you know.
well, they would have been growing up in those hotels that only got a few channels, not much cable, no streaming. They would have been watching all those classic reruns.
Right.
So
Right.
that would have given them that pop culture insight from an
Yeah.
earlier period. I'm
Yeah.
going to go with Southern Comfort because, you know, Supernatural loves its mirrors, and Southern Comfort is really kind of a mirror to Asylum, because Dean gets hit with a cursed penny, and everybody who has picked up the penny has become driven by rage from this Confederate soldier, and they end up taking their grievances out, whatever they're angry at someone about. For one guy, it's his boss, and for somebody else, I think it's a spouse. They kill them, and we have this showdown between Dean, who's holding a gun on Sam and threatening to kill him, and listing all of the ways that Sam has in his mind let him down or betrayed him, which goes back to, you know, that original being unfaithful. One of them, of course, this being season 8, is that when Dean was in purgatory, Sam, you know, was with Amelia. And there's Garth, who's going, I don't have resentments because I just let it go. You know, I don't hold on to things. Dean, you gotta let it go. And it's really only because of Garth that Dean doesn't shoot Sam. And so
Garth has a yogi.
yeah, we get to see that mirror image of, okay, Sam had his resentments, maybe overstated, maybe not. Dean's got his. And so, you know, that insight into, well, what are you holding on to that maybe you shouldn't be holding on to, because look what it gets you. You know, nothing good. So folks, we have time for one more quick round. Travis?
Yeah, I just like the Ghost Facers because I just love those guys, but to the first or the second episode of Ghost Facers where they have all the people in the house and it's about to get locked down at midnight and they start learning about death echoes and seeing how it's like these replays of how the person died again and again and how they were attached to like the toe tags that was kind of causing to be around. And it's, for me, for the boys, it's just like when you have the, again, unfinished business, unfinished words, you know. And I loved when in I think it's end of season 6, beginning of season 7 maybe, but Dean's, hey, listen, when I die, we're square, we're even, no resentments, no nothing, we are good to go in my book. And I think that that's really cool that you get to see play out later, right? Because you have these histories of these ghosts. You see these ghosts again and again coming throughout the series, not the individual ghosts, but the series. And Dean being okay with like, you know what, I'm not going to carry whatever bullshit happened between us into the afterlife. Like it sucks right now, but at the end of the day, we're family. We're here for each other, and I love you guys. And that, I mean, that's really the theme of the show for me, right? Is family and love.
Okay, Susan?
Absolutely. Yeah, the idea that, again, redemption runs throughout the whole series. And I think, you know, it does, we do see a couple of times that we have to cycle through that before we get to the point where everybody's okay with everybody. You know, they get through it, there's forgiveness, they haven't let it all go yet. Then they, you know, so there's several cycles I think they go through before they get to the place where they are okay with one another. And I think that that's anytime those ghosts present themselves as, you know, we see an awful lot of, again, like you were calling them, the mirrors, Gail, that mirror being held up to Sam or Dean. I think we see that an awful lot, and it does help them work through a lot of the, you know, I mean, 15 seasons, that's a lot to work through. And so, you know, the ghosts have helped them do that, I think, in a lot of ways.
Okay, did you have another episode to mention?
Oh, actually, oops, I had it. I was looking at, and I think I went by the page too quickly. See, I've got so many of them, but actually, Long Distance Call.
Mhm.
when that, you know, I mean, Dean's got hell hanging over him and he's grasping on to any little thing he can. And then all these people are getting phone calls from their dead people or their dead loved ones, and they're being, you know, played. They think it's the ghosts, but it's actually this critter in the wires making these phone calls. So it's technically not a ghost, but I think when Dean is hanging on and he thinks it's his dad, you know, that again, you carry that with you, and you carry that little bit of hope with you, and that I think was an awfully
Mhm.
poignant thing. You know, ghosts are everywhere, but they're not even, again, it's the thing, they think it's one thing and it's something else.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's so many.
Oh, there are. Maybe we'll have to do a part 2. We're barely scratching the surface, but I'm going to come back around to another early season one, and that's In My Time of Dying, where Dean gets to be the ghost.
Yes.
And so we have that shocker ending to season 1, where they're all in the Impala and they're heading for a hospital. They've just been through a big fight with Azazel, and they get T-boned by a semi. And the next thing we know, they're all in bad shape in the hospital. Sam's the best off, and Dean is there. They just don't think he's going to make it. And what we really see here, we see Dean out of body trying to communicate with Sam. And I love when they sit down with the Ouija board and, you know, use it to actually talk to each other. But you really see more of that brother bond gelling, because for all the fighting and prank wars and everything, Sam is desolate that Dean might die. And he's angry at his dad for, why are you not doing, why are you caring about the cult now? You know, Dean's dying, don't you care? And so he really goes after his dad, of course, not really realizing his dad's going to make a deal with Azazel with the cult.
Right.
But we also get to see Dean see the other side of being a ghost, because, and it takes him a while to clue in, but realizing that the friendly ghost is actually a reaper and she's there for him, and then trying to get away from her, and seeing that Sam is actually distraught that he's dying. They get a better, Dean, I think, gets a better insight into Sam from the things he saw when Sam didn't know he was around. We get more of an insight into Sam. And then we find out all the way in season 14 or 15 with Lebanon, when John is brought back for a day, and Sam says, I've carried this guilt ever since the hospital, because the last thing I said to you, we fought, and I've never forgiven myself. And John's able to get him to let go of that guilt, and realize that despite their differences, John loved him. And so we see that starts way here at the beginning of season 2, get played out all the way at the end. And I love when the show does that. But we definitely got a lot of insights into the characters with that. Well, folks, we have run through our time. So before we wrap up, please let us know where people can find you online. And if you have a new, recent, or upcoming book, tell us about that too. Travis?
Yeah, I just the upcoming thing I have is Soup Saying Always Heroes with Linda Burness. She's usually on these with us, and it's looking at the boys. It has an interview with Jensen Ackles in it, which is awesome. But yeah, that's my next thing. It comes out in December.
Very good. Susan?
Yes, very good. Yes, with my writing partner Mandy, we have Death in Supernatural. It's hard to get. There we go. Death in Supernatural is available. Julian Richings, who played Death the Horseman, he wrote our foreword, and it has been awesome about supporting everything that we're doing. We let him know that we're doing the Women in Supernatural, and he thought that was wonderful, because he thought it was high time. So Women in Supernatural will be out sometime in the next year, and that will be a list of critical essays as well. That will be a book of a collection of essays. So yeah.
And is there a place you want people to find you online?
Well, you could find us at Women in Supernatural I believe it's the new, oh, I don't even know. They've got rid of the bird. It's called X. We don't
Oh.
spend a lot of time on that. So, but they could probably get us through that, or womenandsupernatural@gmail.com or deathandsupernatural@gmail.com. If people want to ask us some questions, we're happy to answer them.
Okay. I'm pretty easy to find at gailzmartin.com, morganbryce.com. All my social media, and I'm on most of them, is some variation of those names. So if you spell them right, you'll find me. There's always a new book out. Our newest right now is Spark of Destiny, which is one of our steampunk books. And of course, there are always ghosts galore. So everything we write has ghosts in it, just makes it better that way. Anyhow. But most of the time, you can find me here on Continual. So thank you so much for being here. And thanks to all of you for watching and listening. There will be more Supernatural coming up soon. So we'll see you online.